Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the Let's Build That App.com channel. Kind of surprising that we have two videos in 1 week, but here we are. Today's lesson, what I would like to really talk about here is the idea of something called bindings, presentation modals, and also callback functions inside of SwiftUI. Before I go into any code, let me give you a demo of the application we want to build out here. So transition into my desktop. Hopefully you guys can see what the heck is going on here. Basically, I have my iPhone XR simulator right here. This application is a very simple list view, and I'm going to click on this right here, the top right add button. And then as you can see, we are presented with a person creation modal, right? So with this modal, you can slide it down like that to dismiss it. You can also hit on the cancel right here. Okay, now the interesting part about this lesson is to implement the behavior that allows us to fill in information right here. So let's say Brian Vung, and then once we have that filled out, I'm going to hit on this add button here, and you can see the last row has been entered. Just ignore the Steve Jobs image for now, but this right here is the newly created person for our application. So again, the couple of concepts that you have to really get to know in terms of SwiftUI is how exactly do we present this modal right here? It's really different compared to regular UI kit. And then secondly, how exactly do we dismiss this modal whenever we hit this cancel button right here? And that's going to involve something called a binding. And then lastly, we have to insert that person into this entire list view here, which is also something that's quite different compared to standard UI kit development. Okay, so with all that being said, let's kind of dive into a little bit of the code, and I'll show you exactly how to build out this application right now. It's actually pretty easy once you more familiarize yourself with SwiftUI. Okay, the first thing you have to kind of get here is the application code for this entire list view here. The way you get the code is to head on over to letsbuildthatapp.com, click on the middle image right here. This is the first section, so people list with delete feature. Inside of this app guide, I show you guys how to build out this entire application. So just go through this guide right here to follow exactly how this list is built out on the right side. And then this is the final code. You can copy and paste or just download the source code with this button here. All right, once you have the source code download, you should be able to open up Xcode with your project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the project that you can download inside of the XS simulator right here on the left side. Once you run it, you should hopefully see something else other than a white screen. And now you'll see this people list right here, Steve Jobs, good old Timmy, and Joni Ive right here as the last person. Okay, the code I feel like is pretty self-explanatory, obviously because I wrote it, right? But at the very top, we have a people array of people objects. Here is the person right here. So person objects, ID, first name, last name, image, and job title. So, pretty standard struct model object. And then inside the body of our people list, we have the navigation view, which has the navigation bar title of people. And then inside of the list in the middle right here, we have a bunch of rows for each one of these person objects. And then the row is actually this subclass here. So let's kind of see what's going on. We have a struct person row. And then right here, we have something like the H stack, V stack, and the button that says the delete all the way on the right edge. So again, just look through the code. It's pretty self-explanatory. And now what I want to do is I want to introduce this add button on the top right corner. And again, this is pretty easy once you get used to SwiftUI. The basic thing you have to do is whenever you want to add this type of button, it's actually pretty easy if you go into your navigation view right here, right? So this is the entire navigation view. You want to add a button on the internal component right here. So the root child component, I guess I'll call it. You can say navigation bar items and use this one right here. So I'm going to say trailing with a view. So leading is on the left and trailing is on the right. For this, you just want to add in some kind of view, and this guy is just going to be a button object. So button, the button constructor comes with the action, hit enter, enter, and right here just say print out. Trying to add new person. For this right here, just hit enter or backspace and hit brace, and you should be good to go here. I'm going to say text, and inside of the text, we are going to use the add button. And for the configuration of your text, right, you can say foreground color of .white and background color of color .green. Okay, I've been typing out a lot of SwiftUI code lately, so this stuff right here comes to me pretty easily, but it does take a little bit of time to get used to the syntax here. Okay, now with the iPhone XS simulator all launched, we have the add button on the top right. You can click on it and you see the print console at the very bottom says trying to add a new person. Okay, now that we have that, you can see the add button is a little bit ugly, right? You can add your own customization with the font of maybe font size of 16. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. Let me just do that. And I think I want to add some padding as well. So let's just use all edges of maybe 12. And, just go through the customization yourself. Obviously, it's going to look a little bit different compared to this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit this add button again, and that's the effect that we have so far. Now, in order to present this modal on the right side here, right, it's a little bit tricky because inside of SwiftUI, what you have to do to present a modal is to go inside of one of your components inside of your navigation view. And I don't think it really matters where, but you can say present. There's a lot of different options now, and I'm just going to use this sheet one right here. I'm not exactly sure what these other ones do, but let's just use the sheet for now. And then for the sheet, you'll see this new thing called a binding boolean, and you might not understand quickly like what the heck a binding boolean is until you see the code. But I'm just going to declare a new state variable right here. So is presenting add modal is what I'll call it. And let's just set it to false right here. So this state thing is something that you'll have to get used to. But once you have a state variable like this, you can pass in the binding of this variable using the $sign of is presenting add modal. The content right here, just hit a backspace, brace, and brace like that as a text. And let's see, adding a new person in this modal. And I think we are good to go and ready to rock and roll. All right, I'm gonna hit this add button right here. And you can see nothing really happens because we haven't really triggered any type of change inside of our system in terms of modifying this Boolean, right? So it starts off as false. And if you change this to true, I believe when your app starts, because it's true, this modal should be present like that. All right, so that's the effect that we have. And obviously, whenever you hit this add button, you want to kind of trigger some kind of change. And instead of just printing out that code right here, so trying to add a new person, you can simply say self.is presenting add modal and either set it to false or just toggle it to the opposite Boolean value. And hopefully this little bit of code should work. I'm gonna default this guy to false, which is the bit of logic that makes more sense to me. Okay, so false and toggle to true. And there we go. That's kind of how you bring up your presentation modal. Okay, so it took a while to explain that, but it's really important that you understand what the binding Boolean is. You have to make sure that the actual variable is a state variable. Otherwise, you can't get this $sign to show up. Or I think the compiler will actually complain about your code not being correct. Okay, now that we have the tricky part out of the way, let's kind of talk about how exactly do we dismiss this modal from our screen, right? So we have the cancel button right here that allows us to trigger the dismiss. The other option is to drag like that, but we actually want to trigger a dismiss once we add a person or cancel out of that screen. So how exactly do we do that, you might be asking? Well, the code is, again, a little bit trickier because it's new code that belongs in the domain of SwiftUI. Let me show you what the modal code should look like instead of this right here. And you see this text that says adding a new person in the modal. You can construct any type of view that you want really. And what I mean is I'm going to construct a, let's see, an add modal. And let this be a view var body sum view. Don't ask me what this sum means, but Instead of here, you just want to use something else. So let's use a VStack for now. And I'm just going to straight up copy this guy here. So cut is what I want. And in here, I'm just going to say add modal. Once we have this, I think we are good to go. Let's use a button. Button has the action, hit enter, enter, backspace, brace, brace. That's the quickest way to eliminate all this unnecessary code. Inside of the button, let's call it a text right here and cancel. I think that's all I need. So let's confirm that everything is indeed working the way it's supposed to. Let's go ahead and hit the add button right here. You see that adding a new person in this modal, and we have this cancel button right here. If you don't exactly see what's going on, basically the sheet right here is presenting the add modal down below. That's kind of why we have that cancel button here along with the text above it. Okay, so that's how we get the modal to show up in a secondary, kind of a refactored view. The reason why we want to do this is because we want to somehow pass in this state variable from the parent object into this child add modal view. And this code took me a while to figure out. So let's see if I remember exactly what it is. I believe you want to set some kind of binding variable. And if you're just looking at this for the first time, it might not make any sense until you see the whole thing. So let's say var, and let's say is showing modal or is presented. That probably makes a little more sense. And so let's default that to false. And I believe maybe we don't need to default it to any value and just set it to a Boolean. And I think that's good enough. Okay, so with this binding variable, whenever you declare something like this, right, it's a little bit complicated, but if you have a variable defined without any default value, this right here is going to expect you to kind of initialize it as something. Now, whenever you have a binding like this, it's very convenient because you can directly pass this variable right here into this binding area, similar to what this call was, asking us to do. So let's hopefully make sure this works. I'm going to pass in the exact same binding variable right here, which means that whenever I'm inside of this modal, and we have this cancel button right here, so make sure you have a self in front of this guy, I believe, so self in front of that. Whenever you are hitting this cancel button here, you can simply say self.isPresented and either set it to false or just call the toggle function. I don't think it really matters, but I'm going to run the code right now and I'm gonna hit add. Let's kind of see what happens. I'm gonna hit the cancel button right here. And you see the cancel is now setting the is presented to false inside of this add modal view class, view struct, whatever you want to call it. And whenever you toggle the is presented to false, it's actually going to toggle it all the way up to the parent because we're passing a binding to it instead of just a regular Boolean. So the binding is going to set this guy all the way in the parent. It's going to set that to false when it was actually true. So basically we are setting it to toggle true right here. So it's true now. When we hit the cancel, this right here is presented is actually this variable right here. So cancel is going to become false, hence dismissing the entire presented modal because this right here is false. Okay, so hopefully this stuff wasn't too confusing. Again, I know that if you're just looking at SwiftUI code for the first couple of times, you might find this stuff hard to follow. But what I've realized over the last couple of weeks is that SwiftUI I find to be a lot more straightforward to code in terms of, I guess, bindings and reactive programming is a lot easier compared to UIKit programming. So again, once you get used to this stuff, your code should look a lot cleaner and a lot faster to type out. Okay, with all that being said, let's kind of wrap up today's lesson by adding the actual components inside of this screen that allows us to maybe just add in a first name and a last name to this row right here, right? How exactly do we add that? Well, let's kind of see what this modal looks like here. We have a V stack and two H stacks here. Let's try to see if we can do this really quickly. So we have V stack, and why don't we add a spacer here? So I'm going to say spacer. This way everything is going to be pushed upwards. And inside of here, let's remove the text. I'm going to say H stack This h stack will contain a text. This guy will say first name. And why don't we just do the first name for now, because otherwise we're going to be typing a lot of code here. So for the text field, let me show you what the instantiation looks like. You have a string and some kind of binding string right here, right? So this is the placeholder. So let's say, let's make this really obvious. So enter first name is the placeholder. And this binding thing is very similar to what we had in the upper section for presenting modal. The way you fix this stuff is to declare some kind of state variable called, first name for now. Let this guy be a empty string. And I'm going to pass in the $sign of first name, just like that. And everything should be a-okay, hopefully. I'm going to build, and this looks good. It says build successful at the bottom of the screen that you cannot see, but everything is looking pretty darn nice. So let me just copy this and say, let's say last name, and this guy, let's make sure to modify this guy, last name. And for this, right, we just do the same thing of copying that. And good old copy and paste. Hopefully you don't mess up your code, and $sign last name like this. All right, let's run this code now. Just make sure that things are kind of smoothly operating inside of the simulator. Let's hit the add, and you see your first name, enter first name right here. You can start typing in some stuff right off the bat there. Obviously you want to modify this so that the UI looks a lot better. What I'm going to do is, why don't we just enter some padding for the V stack? Obviously it doesn't really matter so much, but let's say 16 for that. And I think I want to add some kind of add button as well. So let's say that and add, I think maybe some padding. So padding in sets of all and 16. Let's run this, and typing out SwiftUI code is a lot faster than UIKit, which is something that I kind of like doing nowadays, right? So this padding right here doesn't look all that great. I think I need to say background and color dot green, and that should be all I need for now, at least. Maybe this h stack can use some spacing or whatever. Let's say 16 spacing. Let's copy this over and just paste that in here. You just have to look up what this code has to be in order to get the UI to look according to your design, and that's close enough for me. All right, let me just change this foreground color to white because the add button looks really, really ugly like that. Okay, now that our UI is much better, let's kind of talk about the first name and last name whenever we enter something here, right? What exactly are these values? Well, because we're passing the binding of first and last name, it's very easy to detect what these values are. And whenever I hit the add button right here, the add, I am setting the is presented to false. And what I'm going to do also is to say print, let's see, print like this right here. And let's just do the first name, so first name, and I think I can run. We need the self in front of this right here. And run this one more time. My computer is really fast, so let's say add, and let's say ABC, hit the add. You'll see ABC down here, and we're also dismissing the modal. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And now the last question is, how exactly do we send this person from this screen all the way back into the original parent screen of this people list view all the way up here, right? Well, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, but I find this callback method to be probably the easiest. So let's say did add person. Let this be of some kind of variable closure type, and let's add in some kind of person right here. And then we can say, we can just execute this as a closure. I'm going to leave it as this right here. And the reason why I do this is because it's going to prompt you right here to add in the did add person callback. And so let's just say fix right here, and we have this, and I believe you can hit enter, and let's see, I believe this is something like this, or person, and let's say in, and like that, and print 1, 2, 3, and the code should be something like this. Okay, so it looks like it's working out correctly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of here. I'm going to print out what my person.firstname is, and then what I'll do is inside of the code where I hit the actual add button right here, I'm going to say, let's see, add button is here. Let's say we have my person, right? I'm going to say self.did add person. It expects you to pass in some kind of person object because that's what we declared this guy as, this closure type. So why don't I first say, let's see, or maybe I don't need all this code. So I'm gonna backspace out of that. And let's see, add person, let's see, init, the first name is self.firstname, the last name is self.lastname. And for this stuff right here, I think I'm just going to pass in some kind of empty image and good teacher YouTube. All right, so this is my person that I'm adding into this function right here. I'm going to go ahead and run. And let's see, this guy right here doesn't like my code. So I think I need one more parentheses, which is something that I do forget from time to time. Let me go ahead and hit the add person right here. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, ABC, hit the add. You'll see that 1, 2, 3 is being printed out because inside of this callback right here, did add person, we're just printing out their first name right here. So that's pretty much the idea of kind of piping our user from here, right? So piping it all the way back up to our original list view. Last thing we need to do is to obviously add this person. So self.people. All the way up here, we have this variable called people, contains Steve Jobs, Tim, and Joni Ive. We're going to say .append the new person of the person that we get directly back from this did add person callback right here. All right, lastly, let's try to see if this example actually works out. So first name is, let's see, Barack. So Barack Obama, our great president from the last presidency. So let's hit the add right here and you'll see that we have Barack Obama is a good teacher YouTube. Again, the reason why that works is because inside of our add button, we are calling the callback that we defined right here. We are using this callback, invoking it with a person object. The person contains the binded first and last name that we enter inside of these two fields right here. So Barack Obama, those are these two state variables right here. And again, because they're state variables, every time you modify the text inside of the text field, they just automatically update these variables right here. Very, very nice feature of SwiftUI. And then finally, we invoke this did add person, which invokes this bit of code right here. This is the callback. And then we're just adding the person right here into the people array. Now, you might be asking, well, how does it automatically know to like update this entire list, right? So let's say Barack 1, 2, 3. And you'll see we have a new person. How exactly does the list right here know to call some kind of reload data to redraw the list? Well, inside of SwiftUI, because everything is operating off of this concept of bindable and states and observed objects and published objects, the reason why the list auto updates is because we have this bit of code, this syntax that says list and people. And because a list is observing this people state variable, anytime you make a change to it, so in other words, when you're making an append or some kind of removal, whenever a change occurs on your state variable, SwiftUI automatically knows to update your UI correctly so that it reflects the latest state. So state reflects the latest state inside of your program. So that's pretty good. And this is one of the reasons why I feel like SwiftUI is going to really take off. You can do things like this using other frameworks such as reactive programming, Arc, Swift, and stuff like that. But I find like this to be a lot easier to understand, and also it's a lot less code to type. Alrighty, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's lesson. If you want to download the source code for everything that you saw in today's lesson, make sure to head on over to letsbuildthatapp.com/guides. You will end up on this page right here. Click into the middle guide, which is going to be called Swift Lists with CRUD Operations, I believe. And then on the very second section right here, presenting Modal for adding people, you can either download the source code or just walk through this guide right here. It comes with an explanation on the left side, which is taking me a lot of time to write out, but it's something that I definitely want to continue doing for the website. And you can, click on the next right here. It kind of walks you through the entire guide as to all the changes inside of the source code to get to the final result, which is this right here. And you see this on the right side as well as the preview image for the source code. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see anything more in SwiftUI, make sure to let me know. I'm going to be putting out more content on this guide right here. So stay tuned. I'll make an announcement on my Twitter account @build.app. And also maybe I will send out a mass email to everyone once I officially release this app guide section. It's still a work in progress. There's a couple of things that I want to update before I let everyone know, but basically these are the 3 guides that I have up right now. Make sure to check out the calculator guide. This one's going to contain, I believe, maybe 1 or 2 more sections. I'm going to show you guys how to use bindings inside of this application as well. It's pretty simple, and it's like really interesting what kind of code you need to type out inside of SwiftUI. All right, so I'm going to leave you here, and make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well. I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye.